Hi, folks. This is the Psychology of Human Relationships, and we're looking at part three of Listening Well. So, we're going to start with asking questions. Now, the big picture is that if you grew up and live in the United States, you would probably guess that asking questions is just part of the way we get to know people. But asking questions is a fine skill in its use in counseling and therapy. Um, and so I want to talk to you broadly about questioning and then narrow it down to a reasonable way to learn a few things about that. First of all, this is a skill that is not typically taught in any significant way, even in graduate programs. There are materials on this subject available, but I can tell you that it's relatively uncommon to get much training in how to use questions to further the therapeutic slash counseling process. Okay, much of what you will do is on the job training with respect to questions, but I just want you to have an idea about what this looks like. In the course I teach on Introduction to Counseling, I do spend quite a bit of time on this. And in fact, there's a chapter in the book that I wrote on asking effective questions, exercises associated with that as well as the narrative. So, so questioning is, first of all, able to be thought of from different perspectives and for different reasons. You can construct a philosophy of questioning in that way from different avenues and different perspectives. But the simplest way is to think about there being at least three different kinds of questions. Okay, so there are closed questions or closed-ended questions or terminal questions. Depends on who you read as to what they call them. That simply require when you ask them a yes or a no in response. Is your name Rich? Yes. Is your name Bob? No. The answers are short, reliable, quick. They do not involve any invitation to explore or to think more deeply than a simple answer. Okay. Now, the next kind, which includes two, is called an open-ended question. Open-ended questions invite exploration and expansion. Absolutely. Most of the time, we want to use in counseling and therapy, whenever possible, the what and the how questions. Those are directly invitational to further exploration and processing and understanding by the individual when they ask themselves that question upon you giving it to them. So, an example would be, how did you go about making that decision? Or what were the steps you took to make that decision? You see how that's far different than a yes or a no question. Now, there's a secondary category within these open-ended questions. I call them exploratory questions. And that is the when, where, and who questions. Those are not usually very much requesting from someone some deep way of thinking or structuring or entertaining reasons for something. No, these give you relatively short answers, where, when, who, but they can be used therapeutically. They just have to be used a bit more cautiously, okay, and not be overused. You don't want to use the short-ended questions in any great volume. In other words, the closed-ended questions, the yes or the no's, you don't want to overwhelm your dialogue with someone with those kinds of questions. No. Now, the first time you meet them, the first couple of times, 3 times, you may have more closed-ended yes or no questions because you're trying to get some information for you. Okay? But once therapy really starts rolling, and you're doing the exploration with the client about the nature of the problem, and you want them to think more deeply about it in one way or another for one reason or another, then you're going to use the open-ended questions, typically what or how. That should still not dominate your dialogue with them, asking questions. But the reason you're asking them questions is not for you primarily to get answers and information. The reason you're asking them should be that you're promoting them to think about something for a particular reason, to process something for a particular reason, to move through something for a particular reason. Okay, so it's for the client, not for you, that you would ask what and how questions. Okay, all right. Examples of these include things like, what was that like for you? How did you decide to make that change? What kinds of solutions have you thought of as you look at this problem that you're talking about? How did that weekend go for you when you went home and to see your parents? What happened after you walked out of the room and then came back? What happened when you came back into the room? What happened next? How did you feel after doing that? What was it like to realize that the car accident stole from you some measure of certainty in the world? Now, you can go to all kinds of depths with what or how questions for all kinds of reasons. And this is not something that I teach in this course, The Psychology of Human Relationships. I simply want you to be aware of the idea that there are many parts to questioning that can get intricate and fascinating and useful. Okay. I have a couple rules of thumb. One is, don't ask more than 2 questions in a row. Just use something else. We'll talk about that something else in just a minute. But use a way to help them talk about what you asked about before you ask about another question. Okay, and what they say and how they say it will tell you whether they have thought about this enough that makes it useful enough or not, and that has to do with the goals that they have and what they do and don't understand about themselves, what they're doing, or a dynamic of a situation. Okay, so now the second thing is, let's use what we call exploration leads. Exploration leads are ways to gather information and to promote their exploration, much like open-ended questions that aren't questions. And so they don't feel as demanding, they don't feel as nosy or snoopy. And so if you've asked two what or how questions and you're going to do a third, you're thinking a third, go with an exploration lead. Or mix up exploration leads with what and how questions. That's probably just a general rule of thumb that works pretty well. Examples of explorations leads are, tell me more about what happened when you went back home for the weekend with your parents. Help me understand what it was like to go through a situation like that. Give me an example of a time when you got through a difficult time in your life and got through in good shape. Give me an example of that. I'd like to learn more about some of your skills and some of your interests. Okay? Fill in some of the details about this problem you have described that keeps occurring. What are some of those details? So I added a what question at the end of a exploration lead in that case, you see? But I did that so that you can see that they really do serve the same function and work essentially as well. Okay? Now the last skill is what we call summarizing. Summarizing is what people who are trying to make an important decision use to make sure everyone is on the same page. So high-level negotiations do this, but they write everything out and they sign their name at the end of a day or whatever, a period of time, so that everyone's on the same page, literally on the same page. That's what it means. And so when anything of any great importance or moderate importance is being discussed by any two people, you can summarize. So you have a conversation about where you're going to go on vacation or where you're going to move to, okay, whether to start school or not. Those are big deals. Depending on who you are, it would be really big deals, really, really big deals. Life-changing deals, actually. And then at the end of that, one or the other can say, so let's see if we are on the same page here. Let's see. We talked about this, and then you said you wanted this for this reason, and I said I wanted to go to see the Grand Canyon because I'd never seen it. And you said, well, because you've seen it 3 times, you really didn't want to do that. But then we talked about, so you go through the process, and then the two of you get to say, yep, that's it, and yep, that's what we decided to do. Or not. You'll discover there was a misunderstanding in some place. That's often where arguments and disagreements come from, and this skill eliminates that. Now, the reason you do this in counseling is so that you can give a structure to the client in the last minute or two of the session about what they moved from and to and how they did that, and how their thoughts and feelings shifted, how they solved a problem or made a decision. That's very useful for them to hear, because when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to remember what you did and how you did it. I totally recommend a brief summary statement at the end of every session with a client. I really do. It works very well. It moves things along. It causes them to think more about that session in the week to follow. I think there's a research project there somewhere. Okay, so you might say something like, during the past hour, we've discussed this. So far, you've talked about this. You started to discuss this, and then you began to consider this, and you decided this. And so you do a minute, and if you think you're not going to remember, you will. If you're listening carefully, listening is an intense process when you do it in a focused way, and you will remember the high points and the low points. You'll remember them. So here are some examples of things people have said and what you might say in response as a reflection. 17-year-old boy says, my parents think everything I believe in is wrong and everything they believe in is right. They think I'm just no good. Okay. The object is not to correct him. The object is not tell him what to do. The object is to reflect, to gain a connection to this person, to show them that you understand, not that you approve of anything or agree that they're right. No. Just to connect with them by reflecting. So if someone said, my parents think everything I believe in is wrong and everything they believe in is right, they just think I'm no good. You could say, among many things, that would be an accurate reflection, you really think your parents don't understand you and think that you're just really not a very good person. Okay? It's your words as a reflection of what they say. Another thing is this by a 34-year-old female. I'm hurting all I can stand. It's become too much of a hassle. Life must have more to offer. I want help before it's too late, if it isn't already. Okay, let me say it again. I'm hurting all I can stand. It's become too much of a hassle. Life must have more to offer. I want help before it's too late, if it isn't already. This is somebody who's very depressed. You can feel that even in this artificial example that I'm giving you. Well, yeah, I'm hurting all I can stand. They can't deal with anymore. They're up to here with stress and pain. Okay? Too much of a hassle. They can't work at it anymore. They don't feel like they can. But then life must have more to offer. A little bit of hope thrown in there by this person. And then I want help before it's too late. More hope. They haven't given up, if it isn't already. So they're ambivalent. They're not sure where they're at. They want help, but they're not sure they have the energy to do it. So you might reflect by saying that. you're in so much pain, you're not sure whether getting help right now is something you can do, but you'd like to try before it's too late. Okay? There's lots of ways to say things that are a good reflection, and those are some of them. So that's part 3. Talk to you later. Bye.